Sector that has done well, that's been the pharma pack. And when we talk about pharma, we're getting a guest now. Anmol Ganju is now joining us. Anmol, thanks so much for taking out time for us. Could you just tell us why this rally in pharma and what has changed? Till about 4 years, they were constantly underperforming. What do you think has changed when you talk to investors, their perception about the pharma companies now?
Thanks for having me, Prashant, and thanks for asking that question. See, there are a couple of things which have happened. If you look at the period pre-COVID, for last 2 quarters, we've been making the case that, there is some kind of a stabilization as far as pharma companies are concerned. There was a deep earnings cut cycle that they were undergoing, which seems to have abated. Now, obviously, as market mood change and people move towards defensives, they look at these companies which have created value long-term, notwithstanding the last 3-4 years of price destruction, and take a fresh view. And there are some companies which stack up and look good from a 3 to 5 year perspective. And at the same time, there are companies which are clearly running ahead of fundamentals at this point of time, given the sudden change in market mood of moving towards defensives or exporters. And what we are seeing by the way of price movement in each of these stocks is a function of that. So we continue to be selectively constructive on certain names. Pharma has always been a bottoms-up story and will continue to be that way.
Okay. All right. Hi, Anmol. This is Mubina as well joining in. Do you expect a more liberal policy now that the US FDA perhaps would follow? I mean, in the last couple of weeks, we do know how the FDA has given clearances to a lot of Indian, pharma plants. So do you think that there'll be a bit more of a unrestricted policy that the FDA would follow from here on as well for Indian plants?
I wouldn't go that far as yet. There has been good news on certain plants. You have had cases of Lupin, Aurobindo having cleared plants. But if you look at consensus expectations for the sector, there was anyways we were building in a clearing of these plants in 3 to 6 months. What has happened is that as a consequence of probably, and there's no way to be sure of this, supply insecurities within the US pharma supply chain, a lot of these have been expedited, and therefore bunched up together. But I think it's too early to make a case that there'll be an unrestricted regime. There is no unrestricted regime in any geography for Indian companies, including India. You have to also bear in mind that Indian companies have spent a lot of management bandwidth and capital to up their standards to an ever-evolving FDA regime. And a liberalized regime does not definitely augur well for them because there will be other competition which also could come in as a consequence of a liberal regime. But that being said, obviously FDA will be more accommodative. So some of the things where they would take a very hard stance and risk supplies to the US, that won't be the case. But anyways, I think this industry as well as the large companies are quite up to the standards, the odd deviation notwithstanding. That's a process which will continue. There has been certain clearances in quick period of time, but this is not something which has to be extrapolated. Because just think about it, if every other pharma company starts getting FDA regime approvals without actually having done the hard work, then there is greater competition and greater pricing pressure, which has been the big disadvantage for the sector. So companies which have improved their game, they definitely stand to benefit as some supply insecurities emerge in the US. But I don't think there is any dropping of standards from a quality manufacturing compliance standpoint as far as the US FDA is concerned.
All right. Anmol, thank you so much for joining us now. And just talking about this massive outperformance that we've been seeing in the pharma sector.